right, we are live and people are filing in.
All right.
I'll probably give them just a minute or two to pop in here.
Oh, yay, Pam. I don't know Rodrigo. But...
Excellent. Well, welcome, Pam and Rodrigo. We're just going to wait a minute or two here to make sure. We never know who's going to show up on these, and it varies week to week. And we're hoping we're going to have a great turnout. I'm super excited, by the way, today. Finally meet Sherry Johnson, and Megan's going to give a proper introduction. But Sherry, really glad that you could make coming out early in the morning there your time to make it here, and great to finally meet you as well.
You as well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
hello, happy to join.
Hey, Pam.
Hi, Pam.
Hey, I'm drinking my coffee, so I'm sparing you.
I know you're up bright and early too.
I am. Yeah, I live where Sherry lives. Yeah, West Coast.
All right.
So should we get started? And we'll just, others may come in, and I'll admit them as they come in. So just format for Rodrigo and Pam's benefit. And it's totally optional whether you guys want to have cameras on or off. We do record this. As you're probably aware, as you were entering, it said we're recording. It's being pushed over to YouTube, but it's your chance to ask questions. Megan's going to introduce our guest formally here in a moment. Usually we open up with a poll, our weekly poll. We have a quick conversation on that, and then we pivot to the topic with our guest, and then we open it up to your questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to push it over to Megan to take it from here.
All right, excellent, John, and thanks very much, Pam and Rodrigo, for joining us, and others who come in as well. We're always excited to have Account-Based Fridays, and today we're especially lucky to have Sherry Johnston, who is the practice lead for all things account-based at Winning by Design, full disclosure, where I work as well. We're excited to have Sherry because she literally has just published in the last day or so a great new research paper on, or article, I should say, on the requirements for enterprise go-to-market models, kind of what you need across sales, marketing, and customer success. And we know that a lot of companies struggle with that and find, one, they want to know how to plan for it, but two, if they've already jumped into it, kind of, if things aren't going the way they hoped it would, what can they go back to do to diagnose where perhaps there have been some misses in their understanding of what that go-to-market requires, and especially if you're maintaining multiple go-to-markets. And I know some of the folks on the line today have multiple go-to-markets in their companies, so that might be a relevant area as well. But in general, you know, Sherry's got incredible background in all things B2B. She's been a marketing leader at companies, including Demandbase and others, and just a wealth of knowledge and experience. So Sherry, thank you very, very much for joining us and for sharing that knowledge and experience on our Account-Based Friday today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, and happy Friday. Excited to, talk to you guys about the topic today, for sure.
Yeah, it's a great topic. Well, and maybe to lead in, John, you had a really interesting poll this week. Would love for you to share that. Let's jump on in. Oh, you're on mute, John.
Oh, you missed the best part, the entire best part of the entire episode there. So each week we run these weekly polls on something related to account-based marketing. And last week we asked a question about a concept called dynamic segmentation. There was an article written by McKinsey that did an analysis around the sales motions and what they were seeing in terms of best practices. And one of the graphs caught my eye where they said that companies that were rotating accounts in were more likely to succeed. And when I say rotate accounts in, rotating accounts into their patch, into their sales territory patch, so somebody could follow up on them. According to McKinsey, those companies were succeeding at a higher rate of close than that of companies that were just picking a patch and kind of staying in that entire patch for an undefined period of time. Let's say it's between the time somebody gets their patch assigned to maybe the new fiscal year. And so we asked our audience, as we do every week, and a couple observations here on the responses. First, this was a pretty low response poll relative to all of our polls that we've done. And that might be attributed to a couple different things. This is a very specific question. And when I looked at who responded on the I don't know category, there were a couple prominent CMOs that responded that they didn't know what their rotation was of their target account focus. And that led me to believe that either from a marketing viewpoint, which typically there are a lot of marketers that come into these polls, one, they may not care, two, they may not know. So because of that, we probably didn't get a huge voting pool as part of this. But I found this kind of an interesting concept of the rotation. And, maybe before I ask Sherry or Megan for their views, the one thing that I will say is I did talk to a vendor that enables some of this capability. And I talked with one of their salespeople. And, I kind of asked an open-ended question of, hey, how are your accounts assigned and how does that work for you? And they did a hybrid approach where they have some accounts that move in and out of a region or a territory, but they've got other accounts that are fixed for their entire tenure or until the next fiscal year. So they were taking a bit of a hybrid rotation as opposed to rotating all of them. It was rotating a portion of them. So with that, I don't know, Sherry or Megan, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I'm going to let Sherry jump in. Sherry, go ahead. You've got some great thoughts on this one.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I think there is a lot of approaches to this that work. There is no one size fits all strategy. Our blueprint best practice is a way to start is rotating them out like 20% of them quarterly. The reason being no more than 20% of them quarterly. And the reason being is that, one of the powers of account-based in my mind is really understanding your addressable market and understanding that segmentation strategy as well as messaging that goes with your target account list, not just the account itself. And so oftentimes my content strategy, the types of channels we will use will be targeted to what that account list is. And I think that is part of the power that account-based brings to the table of really making it very relevant to the audience you've all agreed that you're going after. And so, the other narrative I think that is interesting to this is that it obviously would, in my mind, depend on whether you're doing one-to-many, one-to-few, or one-to-one account-based, right? So in a one-to-many model where it may be kind of almost a ACV of 25K, you have a very large addressable market. I can see that rotation being much more effective, where you're really making sure that those in-market signals are there for your sellers. On the flip side, when I'm helping companies, I'm thinking of one who sells, $2 million manufacturing equipment to a very finite addressable market who is never, there's only a handful of companies that can really buy their solution. This kind of rotating target account list would not make sense. So I think also kind of segmenting it based off of that one-to-few, one-to-many, and one-to-one ABM type approach you're doing would be critical to how you approach this.
Yeah, Sherry, I totally agree. And I think this one is kind of tricky because, there are also situations where you pick a list of target accounts because they're a great fit for your ICP. But because we've seen, so much focus on companies wanting to use things like intent data, right, that's showing them who's an active buyer, it's really tempting to say, wow, well, if some of the people that I want to talk to aren't in market, maybe I should just change my account list, focus on the ones who are. But I think there's also a pretty big risk in that. And I think you alluded to this too, which is they may not be in market because they simply either aren't ready, are already engaged with somebody else, or simply don't know, right? They haven't identified that you are doing something, especially for new concept, new paradigm, companies that are talking about creating categories that people don't have budget for. They don't know, right? So they may be a perfect fit for you. They just don't know it yet. And that's where, patience with a target account list is so critical. And I've had a number of people over the years kind of push back on target account lists and account-based in general, saying, well, what about people who don't know you, right? If you can't, get them to engage right away. And I think that starts to speak to the really important role of marketing in awareness and educational phases to say, that these companies are in theory the right fit. The trick is helping them to identify the opportunity that you present for them. And that can take some time. So by switching out of those great fit accounts, just because they're not there yet, can hurt you. And then the other thing is, if you don't catch those accounts in the earliest stages of their education cycles, you run the risk of their perception of what the right solution is being shaped by somebody else. That they got to first, right? That they happen to know about sooner, especially if you're not the biggest name in the space, and they wouldn't have necessarily come upon you naturally. So a whole bunch of different factors that say jumping around with your target account list, especially if you've been careful and accurate in your assessment of your great fit accounts, could present some risk. But maybe it's also where you say, well, maybe it's not the right thing for sales to do, but it's the great thing for marketing to do, to work with those accounts who aren't maybe showing all the signs that you want today, sort of building that awareness. So anyhow, another point of view, but target accounts, I think, are kind of super central to the whole idea of moving up market and selling to enterprise and creating the right go-to-market to engage, larger accounts. So Sherry, since that's kind of our main topic today, and you've done a lot of thinking, a lot of helping of companies on this topic, I would love for you to maybe share with us a couple of the things that you've seen over time that are kind of most critical as companies are thinking about, moving up market and getting to an enterprise playbook. What are some kind of opening words of advice you'd have? And I'm going to keep an eye on the chat, because we've got some folks here who are hopefully going to ask some really great questions too. So I'm going to keep an eye on chat so we make sure to address those. But if you want to jump in with an intro, that would be great.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, in helping many companies that are in the situation where, a common progression is that they've had success in mid-market and really want to scale their organization by moving up market and servicing these enterprise companies. And in having this experience with them along their journey, I think there's a lot of things that can be sorted out to begin with before you kind of jump into that journey, but not only from the marketing perspective, but CS and sales, and really making sure that you understand what that looks like to move up market all the way around. A common things I see is just the oversimplification of the success needed to move up market from a variety of factors, and often it looks like something like, well, we hire a few enterprise reps, to be honest, and that's sort of moving up market. So what I would advise people to really look at is look at your whole go-to-market and those three pillars of both marketing, sales, and customer success, and really understand your buyer, how they buy differently, what types of things you need to address differently in order to really be successful in the enterprise from a go-to-market perspective. So starting with top of funnel, oftentimes I see the same demand gen high velocity strategy that is in the mid-market applied to enterprise, and the answer is, hey, where's all of our enterprise demand marketing team? And there really isn't that shift to understanding that, one, in the enterprise, the stats show that most of the inbound demand, or most of the demand, is built outbound, right? So you're more of an account-based approach is more appropriate for enterprise. And in the article, I've also referenced that is the number one reason people move to account-based is when they're moving into the enterprise. So your channels are going to be different. Your expectations need to be changed of that. You're not going to have the same level of inbound typically in the enterprise as you would have in your mid-market. It takes that different approach. Also looking at the channels and the types of ways you're engaging companies. Typically you have more personas in the enterprise as you're selling into it. So it requires more messaging, a broader stakeholder list as you're reaching out and ensuring that you're reaching a larger buying journey. So that's, from the marketing perspective. From the sales perspective, the pitfalls I common see are just really also having that training and skill set on the sales side to make sure they understand how to sell into enterprise. Taking your mid-market reps that are successful and potentially just moving them into the enterprise is one common pitfall I see, without giving them proper training around how much more complex the sale is in the enterprise and how to navigate that stakeholder journey, how to do much more bespoke account research that's needed in enterprise accounts. to really get them across the line. And then finally in CS, of course, it takes a much more one-on-one, a CS approach to manage, retain those accounts, but can be incredibly fruitful. As we typically have seen, enterprise accounts, the retention rate is a lot higher than lower mid-market or SMB, which can be incredibly fruitful for your business. So I'll stop there. I know that was a lot, but that's a kind of in a nutshell, a bit of what I'm hoping to communicate in terms of what I'm seeing in the market.
Got it. And one thing that I noticed in terms of companies that go up market, and I don't want to kind of broad brush the entire industry. I've just seen this in a couple instances where a company that wants to move up market but has a sales team that's geared toward a mid-market sale. And what I noticed in that particular instance is they took their mid-market selling approaches, which are a little bit more transactional, and they applied it to a Fortune 50 selling environment, and it imploded because the Fortune 50 runs at a marathon pace, whereas maybe the mid-market from a sales cadence perspective is a 400-yard sprint. And because of that mismatch, it was off-putting to the Fortune 50 company. And the only reason I know this is because I had kind of a bird's eye view of what was happening here. The salesperson in the mid-market felt that, hey, I kind of want to quickly get to a yes or no. And what I noticed in the large enterprise is there's a lot more socialization that has to occur as well. So as part of that process, or that account-based process, I wonder if it's also, as people are moving up market, is it a different people skill set that companies should be investing in, as well as, in addition to the things that you had mentioned from a marketing viewpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a good point of the transition there, where it can feel like slowing down, or lots of times I get the immediate reaction, 3 months into trying to move to the enterprise, that it is not working. But I think the visibility of understanding your sales cycles are typically much longer in enterprise. To your point, you need to engage many more stakeholders. And the education and selection phases are typically longer and more complex, with more content needed, more support needed. And those are the types of pitfalls that I commonly am seeing, of just making sure that you have that addressed for who. In the article, I have a graphic of hey, here's a view of what an enterprise journey looks like. Understanding how long your average deal size or your sales cycle might be, who's in that buyer's journey, how many touch points is it going to take to get them across the line, and being really realistic around what that looks like across SDR, sales, marketing, in order to support what can be a very fruitful transition into landing more enterprise accounts, but just takes a little extra work.
And we've got a great question from Pam here. In today's purely digital world, what tactics do you see working most effectively? Pam, you want to share your question live, or you want me to just go ahead and read? You can type.
Oh, sure. I'm fine. I'm fine talking.
Yeah. Thanks, Pam.
Yeah. Just with everybody I'm doing one-to-one ABM. So with everybody being online and people being burnt out on virtual, what tactics do you see working best to reach executives, when they haven't met you? Maybe they know of your company, but they don't realize you're in a certain space, that sort of thing. And then the second part of my question is, you mentioned account research. We use certain vendors and things, but I'm just wondering, what do you see working best to, fully research an account before you go in there? And if you don't want to name vendors, like types of companies or something that, that are helping people ramp up, because I know you said do your research first. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, nice to hear from you, Pam. Thanks for joining.
Sure.
This is really a hot topic right now, where lots of times the enterprise engagement wasn't in person, whether it be a field event, a conference, a site visit, etc. That hasn't been something that we've been able to do. But I did post an article a little while ago around how to engage executives. And I think that in helping companies with their account-based plays, the ones that I'm seeing work the most are, one, to your point, having those unique research and insight points that are incredibly relevant to your buyer. So this doesn't have to be any fancy marketing program necessarily, but just how do you provide content in a way that's incredibly relevant to the buyer and where they're at? And that takes some typically partnership with marketing to align that with that account research that is being done by either the SDR or the AE to match that and have really pointed messaging that is helpful for your buyer. So that can be like a unique insight on their problems that they may not have. That could be, in some cases, being able to address their pain points in a way that you're uniquely able to do by understanding them from their research, whether that be evaluating their 10K reports, looking at their LinkedIn and understanding what pain points they're describing online. But yeah, using digital quite a bit more to really uncover those nuggets of information. Takes a little bit more time, but I've definitely seen it much more effective than the batch and blast of trying to churn through your target accounts without the research and insight. In terms of vendors, I think, frankly, LinkedIn, having that one-to-one type of insights that LinkedIn provides you, or even LinkedIn Navigator has been incredibly helpful for people. So things like noticing job changes within your target accounts as a trigger, or just really following what your buyers are posting and what they're commenting on, what articles they're mentioning, that can help you get some of those unique insights to their pain points, their situation, the impact they're trying to achieve. And then, back to sort of what is a common challenge right now is how do we get that real high touch, high value engagement that field events used to provide in a digital world? And what I commonly see is not all Zooms are created equally. And I think people need to realize that, where I think we went from thinking that, if you think about the translation to this same type of analogy to the physical world, I don't think we would consider a steak dinner the same as a 1,000-person Dreamforce happy hour event, right? Like, those are both field events, but they're very different. And the types of people you would invite to them would be very different. And the expectation around the level of engagement you would have are very different. And so I think you need to translate that same mindset to Zoom. So we see things that are working where it is still, how do you get that executive access to people on Zoom? So instead of it being just a webinar, while it may still be hosted on Zoom, having a high value speaker, to have someone that's an expert from your organization on a topic that would be relevant to your prospect joined for a maybe 5-person open roundtable, is a very valuable offer that you can engage with, similar to that kind of steak dinner approach in the field, versus a webinar where you're unlikely to get a C-level executive or any or a lot of stakeholders to a one-to-many webinar that's not really addressing their points and their insights specifically. So I think we just need to translate those a little bit differently to think about them from how we orchestrated in the field and how we think about orchestrating them differently online.
Thank you for that, Sherry. Yeah, so much used to happen organically in person, like peer-to-peer sharing and things like that. So it's, how do you replicate that? So I completely agree that all Zooms aren't equal. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I wonder if are more events starting to go hybrid right now too, where starting to hear a lot more people, at least in the U.S. now, and outside the U.S. might be a different ball game, but I'm starting to hear more enthusiasm about people meeting face to face for the second half of the year, either in local events, maybe not getting on a flight, but a local event and or a virtual event, the kind of hybrid with a virtual event. Those might be other avenues. And then the other thing that I've heard a lot about with the Zoom fatigue is experiences that can be done online. So for example, if you could have like a wine tasting or pizza making or something like that with peers, sometimes that can kind of bring people together as another way to engage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, we've got a great question from Rodrigo, who's with a Brazilian health tech company, and he's just getting started with account-based marketing. Rodrigo, you've come to the right place today because you've got a whole bunch of people on this call who I know from personal information have all built account-based programs from the ground up. Thanks for being here. That's great. Welcome. So I mean, personally, I would love to maybe shift gears a little bit. Perhaps Sherry, if you want to give it a moment to think of sort of your best piece of advice for someone getting started, and then, Maureen, Pam, Joe, obviously John, you too, everybody on this call today has some great tips. So if you want to either put them in chat or share them live, would love to just maybe close on that thought, because I think we've got some good folks for you here today.
No, thanks. Nice. Just a little context. We're just moving from outbounding sales strategy to ABM. We tested some with 3 deals last year, and we got excellent results. So this year the focus is to implement a strategy with a small team, but much more structured in the phases and test. And last year I just tried by myself, doing everything. And this year we structured the team with one people with one person doing the BGR part with IC. In English would be commercial intelligence. Do you have just one commercial intelligence, one BGR, and one field account executive doing all this part with the customer success team doing the two analysts doing the customer success. This is the pod sales that we built, and I'm just starting, so I think many challenges from now. So I think you can guide me to from the beginning. Sorry for my English in Brazilian.
No worries.
I don't know if I was clear.
Your English is great, better than probably the rest of our Portuguese. So.
Yeah.
Well, my ears lit up when I heard the pod, because I would say, starting out, that is where I see a huge amount of success. Is a lot of field offices have the biggest success with account-based because they are just naturally in a small pod where they're all aligned together around moving accounts across the line. And then I find the US headquarters office, it's just a lot harder to get everyone on the same page. So I think that the idea that you're even starting out with a pod structure and everyone's focused on there, my quick advice is the biggest impact I think people can make are aligning around an ideal customer profile and a target account list of some sort, whether it's dynamic or not. But if everyone can get together in that pod and be aligned around success looks like us all moving these deals across the line together, and how are we going to do that is a great first step.
Oh, thanks. I have another question about the ABM place. How can I create a weekly meeting or something I don't know exactly how to build this whole play. If you have a weekly meeting to build together, or if the marketing team build the play and present to the team, how can I organize the play?
Sure, I'm happy to pipe in, but the way we approach that typically is that the marketing team is quarterbacking plays. So if it's an integrated play, but they're definitely focused on helping bring in insights from field reps, SDRs, who have more of an ear to the ground exactly to these accounts and can sometimes offer up tips and tricks and insights that marketing isn't aware of. So having those two teams work together is very helpful. So lots of times we'll do workshopping play designs with the entire team, but then marketing will come back, button it up, make sure that all the pieces are there, operationalize it, and then roll it out in the pod team as a way of building pipeline. So that's one approach. I'm sure there's many, but that's how I typically help companies approach it from my side.
Okay, like a weekly meeting that the focus is to build the whole place is a good option. Like weekly, or like, I don't know if the frequency is good.
Yeah, most of the time we're rolling out account-based. We'll have a weekly pod meeting for companies, whether they have one pod or multiple pods. In which case they're looking at the dashboard, how are accounts performing, course correcting, diagnosing that dashboard, rolling out plays, and then providing any sales insights of pipeline deals and closed won deals to get that storytelling and best practices moving throughout the team.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
All right, and some good advice from Maureen as well in the chat. And Pam, thank you. Yep, I'm all really great stuff. But you got a good group here today to think about this stuff. And Sherry, thank you so much. John, what do you think? Should we wrap things up since we're at half past?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sherry, thanks for making the time, and everybody for making the time to come out. And we're getting together again next Friday. Guest TBD. We've got a bunch of guests that are queued up, and we're just trying to narrow down who we're going to have next. So yeah, hopefully keep coming back every same time, same channel. We share best practices on account-based marketing and strategies and tips and tactics. So hopefully you'll get some value, not just today, but ongoing.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the insights.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday.
You too.